We're going live now.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Members, you are now aware of the need to keep your video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep your microphone muted, except when I invite you to speak. Please click the raised hand function if you wish to ask a question or comment. Once you have spoken, please remember to switch off the raised hand function and your microphone. There might be a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do so. Should this occur, I would declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it's not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. Can I remind members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded and that these recordings will be published on the Council's website. Because of sickness and viral conditions, I'm afraid the membership has been changed quite significantly for this particular meeting. But that said, I will start by calling the names of all members of the committee to establish your attendance. When I call your name, please unmute your microphone and confirm you are present. Councillor Ian Bates.
Present, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Peter Hudson.
Present, Chairman, thank you.
Councillor Mike Shellings.
Here.
Councillor Matthew Shooter.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor John Williams.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Graham Wilson.
Present, Chairman.
And obviously myself. Dawn, do we have any apologies for absence? And then do we have any declarations of interest from the members? Apologies, please, Dawn.
Apologies from Councillor Wells. We have Councillor Bates attending. And apologies from Councillor Maguire. We have Councillor Shooter attending.
Thank you, Dawn. For those of you who might not be aware, but Councillor Maguire fortunately has got the viral sickness and is obviously in bed suffering at the moment. I'm pleased to say he's not in hospital. Turning then to agenda item number 2. Sorry, I presume there are no declarations of interest. I suppose that's a presumption I shouldn't make, but nobody's sticking a hand up or waving at me. Thank you. Agenda item number 2, public minutes of the Audit and Accounts Committee meetings held on the 26th of January, which you should have in your pack, and also on the 5th of March, which were distributed by email this morning. I'll go through the 26th of January page by page. However, with the 5th of March, I will take it as read in bulk unless there are any observations raised. Turning then to the agenda, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8 and 9, page 10, page 11, 12 and 13. I see no hands raised. I take it therefore all accept the report as written. Dawn, I will sign the agenda and the minutes as and when it's appropriate, when I can catch up.
Thank you, Chair.
Turning to the action log. That can be found on page 15 as a starter. Minutes number 297 to 299 on page 15. (299 to 281). I know it goes back downwards. Page 16.
Chairman, there's no description of what's going to happen about the 6 invoices issued in October, and which are going to be circulated to us. Do we have a target date for that?
That's Debt Management Update 299.
Yes.
I haven't. Dawn, have we had?
For all the debt management ones, I think there are 5 in total. I actually had an email from Alison over lunchtime. What I'll do is I'll circulate that to members with the updates within it, and I'll also append that to the minutes when they go out.
Graham, does that help you?
I don't know, Terry, until I've seen the email. I won't know what it says.
Well, you know as much as I do at the moment.
if it says Mr. Wilson will be receiving the 6 invoices by close of play tomorrow, I shall be delighted. If it implies you've got to wait another 6 months, that doesn't sound quite so good.
If it says the latter, I'll certainly chase it up and make sure it's done, or we have more knowledge as to why before we retire at the end of April. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Page 17 and page 18. Okay, I'll take the action log as accepted, except obviously the one that Graham has just raised. Okay. Now I'd like to turn to a revised agenda, if I may. We have no petitions or public questions, but we'll push on with agenda item number 5, which as read, which is the consultants and agency worker data. And Janet, I think you're presenting this one.
That's correct, I am, yes, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. This is a short report to update you on the use of agency workers and consultants across Cambridgeshire in Q2 and Q3 of the current financial year. I think some of you will recall this. These reports were introduced a couple of years ago now to give oversight to Audit and Accounts Committee of the usage, the extent of the usage of both agency workers and consultants, and led to a revision of our use of consultants policy as well, which has been very helpful to help us focus this activity. So the report sets out the use of consultants in section 3. For Q2, we had 3 consultants at that point in time engaged via Opus, now known as Opus at Cambridgeshire, since the changes to LGSS last year, no longer Opus LGSS. That's a diminishing number of people engaged via Opus now that we have our new policy in place. So there were two ongoing at the end of Q2, and you'll see further in the report that that's down to just 1 ongoing assignment in Q3. There is a spreadsheet attached, an appendix to the report, which sets out in more detail all of the consultants that we used during Q2 and Q3. In terms of a summary of that, in section 5, there is also excuse me. In section 5, there's also a summary of the agency worker data during Q2 and Q3. So it's different, obviously, from the consultants. These are the interim and agency workers that we engage mostly via Opus Cambridgeshire. You'll see for Q2 that there was a reduction in the spend on the same quarter in the previous year of £0.866 million, which is obviously really positive to see. In Q3, there was a reduction of £0.353 million. I think it would be reasonable to say that whilst we hope that continues and intend that to be a downward trajectory, and we hope it will continue in that way, whether that will look the same when we look at the same period next year, we're not entirely sure, because I think we have to be realistic and recognise that some activity did cease during, this was still in the early days, fairly early days of the pandemic, and some activity did slow down or cease. So it may be that it doesn't look quite as positive as that next year, but obviously all our efforts will be focused to do that. The majority of our agency worker spend is, as always, set out at the bottom of page 2 there, is in relation to social care, and particularly children's social care. And like all other authorities, we struggle to recruit social workers and to retain them in a very competitive environment. So we have an ongoing effort in terms of recruiting and retaining social workers. At last count, I just asked for an update on what was happening on this the last couple of days, and we have now got, and have had for some months actually, a rolling advertising campaign to attract candidates to permanent social worker roles, and we are interviewing candidates all the time rather than just doing it in a more, sort of just in response to vacancies as they arise. And we have actually managed to recruit 11 permanent social workers in the last 3 months, which is good news. We've obviously got more to fill, but that's a good start. And we've also managed to recruit 7 more student social workers, so assisted in that they've passed their social work degree and now have to do their assisted and supported employment, so their probationary year, if you like, post qualification. So that's another 7 social workers that we're bringing in, which will help us with our aspiration to grow our own supply of workers as well. So that really is the key messages from that report. But if anybody's got any questions about any specifics on the data, then please do ask, and I will answer any questions that I can.
Thank you, Janet. John, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On pages 23 and 24, I see that there's no budget holder for the Shire Hall relocation.
Yes, I beg your pardon, but that was picked up the other day. It should be Chris Mallion as the Chief Finance Officer. He's the SRO of that
Right,
project.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Couple of points. First of all, I think there were some other blanks in the budget holder that I spotted, so presumably they can be filled in at some stage. Secondly, to say that the reductions on of 4.19 and 3.76% Q2, Q3, I think is very welcome. I was particularly pleased to hear what you had to say, Janet, about the continuous recruitment, and the numbers that you've identified are heartening, and I'm very pleased about that, both for the permanent and the trainees. And I wonder whether we actually envisage the day when we will not have shortages in these key areas.
I mean, that's the holy grail, really, isn't it, for us? I think it is, because it's a national, well, it's a worldwide challenge, but certainly nationally in the UK, we struggle to find social workers, and we do, because it's such a difficult market. We know that there is also a temptation for social workers to go over to the agency market rather than work on a permanent contract of recruitment, because they can attract higher rates. So those are the challenges that we're working with. What we are continuously trying to do is to position Cambridgeshire as an employer of choice, particularly, well, across all areas of employment, not just social work, but also to sell to our agency workers as well as to the market the benefits of working for Cambridgeshire, in the hope that we can attract and retain social workers who see us as an organisation that will invest in them and their training and learning, as well as their their sort of professional development. So that's the aspiration, and we are continuously looking for strategies. What perhaps is worth saying, just to give you a little more assurance, is that we do have a recruitment and retention strategy board chaired by Wendy Ogle-Wellborn, which meets, I think it's every 6 to 8 weeks, where we are continuously reviewing these things, and she is challenging us to come up with different and better ways to try and gain a competitive edge.
Thank you. If I may, Chairman, I seem to remember some time back that we had we sent out British Expeditionary Forces to the Far East and also more recently to South Africa. And I understand that those results are a bit mixed, but I'm particularly concerned as to whether or not the salaries that we pay would make a recruitment from abroad get through the restrictions on recruitment of people from abroad.
So our social worker post certainly would be above the threshold whereby people could apply. You're quite right. We have had mixed responses to campaigns abroad over the years, or mixed success, if you like, I should say. Really, we've managed to recruit. We haven't always managed to retain those people. So our efforts now are much more about the UK market rather than going overseas at this point in time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. I just have two small points, if I may. When I look at consultants, I'm pleased to see they're going down, and we're just left with the one now, which is in planning, which I would think would be an ongoing job and might be more of an officer post than a consultant post. But is that time scaled? Do we know the life of that particular post?
That particular one, they have not put a time scale on it yet. No, I mean, I have got details on some of the others on the appendix. There are a lot of those. There are clearer time scales, but they haven't got an end date for that particular one yet, I'm afraid. But I'll push back on that and ask. Would you chase that one up? And the other one is, you've probably covered, that's my second question, is who checks that the budget holders are being realistic with the amount of personnel they're employing and the need for those personnel? I think we have got a fairly tight use of consultants policy now, so there is some rigour in that process in terms of... I'm really talking about agency workers rather than consultants. Apologies, Councillor Rogers. I missed that. My signal just cut out a bit there. I'm saying, and I missed your last question. I'm sorry. I was more talking about agency workers than consultants. It struck me we have a lot of agency workers. Oh. I just want to know who does the follow-up checks. Right. So in the same vein, there is rigour to the process that people have to fill out an exemption form to recruit, even if it's for an agency worker. Not, there was a time when perhaps it might have been easier. That's not the case anymore. They do still have to seek permission to go out to recruit an agency worker, and they are time limited. So after 12 weeks, we do go back. They're only given permission for 12 weeks because the idea is always to get an agency worker for a short-term period, as I'm sure that's what you're alluding to, and then in the meantime be recruiting permanently to the... Thank you very much, Janet. I'm much reassured. Thank you for that. I can't see any more hands up. The recommendation is for us as a committee to note the current data and the use of consultants and agency workers. Are we happy to endorse that? Thank you. No problems there. Gentlemen, I now have to seek, and ladies, of course, I have to seek your permission now to basically reorganize the agenda as such. I'd like to take items 11 and items 12 earlier than actually forecast, as both officers have later commitments this afternoon of some importance. As regards safer recruitments to school, which is item 6, I've now scheduled that last as Diana is unable to attend. However, she will be happy to respond to any questions members might have, and these obviously can be reflected in an appendix to the minutes in due course. Would you be happy for me to change the agenda as such, please? Can't see any complaints. Thank you very much. So, Ben, we're now on to the Use of Regulation Investigatory Powers Act, known as RIPA. Ready when you are.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for accommodating my later diary commitments. As a council, we may investigate certain criminal offences, such as counterfeit goods, rogue traders, blue badge fraud. And as part of those investigations, we can undertake covert surveillance, and RIPA is the framework that governs the use of those powers. I talk in the report about the different types of surveillance. You have directed surveillance, which may include using CCTV, acquiring communications data, and the use of covert human intelligence sources in certain operations. In all of these matters, we must meet the crime threshold, and we must, which is that the offence must be one, punishable by 6 months or more in prison, and we must seek judicial approval. And there are, I would say at the point that there is the last line of the report is that Cambridgeshire has not used the powers since 2018. I was at Peterborough's audit committee last night, and Peterborough haven't used those powers since 2017. So as both authorities sharing the same policy and same officers, we are not big users of these powers. And that primarily is because there are many other ways to investigate criminal offences now that are far more efficient and far more effective than sitting in a car, for example, watching people. So much more is online, so much more is available through data matching that many councils just simply don't use these powers. However, we were inspected in February of this year by IPCO, and they did it virtually in light of the pandemic, but also in recognition that as a council that doesn't use the powers very often, the main thing to focus on is our policy, our communications, and our training. It was a very positive inspection, as the last one was as well. We had some questions beforehand to improve our policy and our officers' awareness around social media and retention of data. We were aware we wanted to update our policy before the inspection, but felt it wise to take the advice and practical experience of the inspector to make sure we were taking best practice into the future. They did identify that we could improve our policy by including part of the code of practice in it, but there were no formal recommendations as such. Social media is a big area that many people in the council use. It's very easy to find information online about people that you may be investigating, and we need to make sure our staff are aware of when that might cross from some research into a more formal investigation process. But that was our main comment, and that's the point we'll be taking forward as regards training and awareness across both councils. And I'm happy to take any questions from yourself, Chair, or any of the committee.
Thank you, Ben. I do not see any questions from the committee. I have one small question for myself. You mentioned about sitting in a car. Obviously now scattered around our towns and in some villages, we do have these proliferation of cameras. What authority as a council do we have to use the information from such cameras? Or do we have to go through the police, or what's the case in that particular requirement?
In the case of, because Cambridgeshire as a county council doesn't have the CCTV rooms that Peterborough has or the district councils have, but you can access, if it's footage that's already been recorded, that's not what you'd consider directed surveillance, and you could apply to see that footage. And I know many instances where councils, officers and the police have done so. If you're going to take a CCTV camera, and which is ordinarily very overt and very much in the public domain because we can all see them and we can see the signs up, but you're going to direct it at a person or a shop or something like that, then you've moved into the world of directed surveillance, because nobody is expecting the camera just to be pointed at them all the time. So at that point, RIPA authorization would be needed. You often find that the police do this and put in the appropriate application to a CCTV room to use the cameras in that way. If a council officer is going to do it, then that they would do the same thing. And trading standards, for example, which is a county council service, if they were looking at something in a Fenland area or East Cambridgeshire, they would approach that CCTV room and make the appropriate application to use the cameras. So it's possible. It depends how you're going to use them, is the short answer.
Thank you, Ben. Mike, I see you have a question.
Well, it's a statement, Chairman, if I am heard, yes. It's that we've had these reports on and off for a number of years now. We have not in that period, as far as I can recall, utilised these powers, but I am always grateful that Ben comes along and ticks the box which says that we're doing it right. And I'm grateful for his efforts. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mike. Much appreciated. I echo that as well, Ben. Thank you. Could you put your hand down, Mike, if possible? Sorry.
Certainly, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions from any other members, please? If not, the recommendation is to note the outcome of the inspection of the Cambridgeshire County Council by the Investigative Powers Commissioning Office, or IPCO, and note the use of powers within the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, RIPA. Are we all happy to endorse those recommendations? Nobody objecting? Thank you very much, Ben. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Bye.
The next agenda item I'd like to take is the Manor Farm audit. We have Tony Cooper and Tom Kelly here to update us on the 31 recommendations that were made by the external soliciting team, Mazars. I've forgotten their name now, I do apologise.
Mazars.
Mazars. Thank you, Mike. And Tony, I believe you might be leading on this.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. So, as you say, on the 5th of March, this committee considered the Mazars report into the County Farms Service. This report provides an update on progress to date against those 31 recommendations. As you'll see in Appendix 1, we've gone through and provided an update on each of the individual recommendations, and they are colour-coded into green actions which are currently live, yellow ones which have yet to be commenced, and grey ones which are completed and don't require further action. At this point in time, we have 13 of the actions are completed. We have 15 which are currently underway and being actioned, and three of them which have yet to be started. In terms of progress, we have undertaken a number of pieces of work, and in fact are presenting some of those to the County Farms Working Group tomorrow. So it's very much a work in progress, and we are actively progressing these matters. Chair, I'm happy to go through each recommendation one by one if the committee wishes to do so, or I can take questions if members prefer.
I am open to opinion, but I think I go through one by one and then we'll make sure we clear the yard arm, so to speak.
Fair enough, Chair. I will do that. Okay, if I can refer members to Appendix 1 and the schedule of recommendations, I'll just very briefly précis the audit recommendation and where we're up to. So audit recommendation 1, the core element of that was a comprehensive review of the farm service processes and procedures. That is well underway, as I've just described, and is set out in this document and is due for completion by September of this year. There was a sub-recommendation in relation to changes to approval limits and procedures, which wasn't agreed, and we will continue to follow the Cambridgeshire County Council approval processes. And the final sub-recommendation in relation to audit support, we're working very closely with our colleagues in internal audit to support us as we go through this process. So whilst they're not seconded as such, they are very much part of it. So that's recommendation number 1. Recommendation number 3, which is the next one, which is live, relates to providing a suitable set of KPIs for the farm service. That is underway. We have some initial proposals of KPIs, which we're working through. We still have a reasonably protracted delivery date for those because there are 2 elements. One is in terms of service KPIs, and then linking wider KPIs to corporate reporting in terms of investment returns and similar matters. So very much in hand, but I think will be a protracted process, so we make sure that they are suitably aligned and producing the information and outcomes that we're seeking. Recommendation 4 relates to data cleanse of property data, which we have done previously and are repeating that, going through it again to make sure that the data is entirely accurate. And as this committee is aware, we are initiating a process to get a new property asset database for the council, which will encompass the farm service as well as the rest of the council's property holdings. We're about to go out to soft market testing in relation to that database imminently. Unfortunately, a core member of that team contracted COVID recently, so it's delayed us slightly. Recommendation 5 relates to a standard code on the ERP finance system for each property. We are looking into this. There is a logic to it. However, we just need to work through the detail of how that code will be used within the system in terms of reporting, because systems like the debt management system that is used already have their own code structures and systems.
Mike, you have a question?
Yes, Chairman, and I'm sorry, this is about the previous item. It's taken me this long to work out how to get my hand up working from the document. The lack of a property database, and all in whistles and bells property database, has been a constant comment to the audit committee for practically every statement of accounts, review, audit, etc., that I can recall. And I think it's extremely good news that we're going out to get this sorted. I think it's extremely bad news that it's going to take so long. It would be really, it would ease the audit and the pain that our external auditors feel every time they come over this area, if that could be accelerated. And I wonder if there's any scope for that.
Yes, to a certain degree, there is scope for acceleration. That would require resourcing and funding, being candid, and that's balanced against also the fact that it is a relatively complex and potentially expensive process and needs to be got right. And I have some experience of getting it right and getting it wrong in the past, but it is a resource-intensive activity, and that's something I can take forward in terms of getting suitable resource in terms of project management, implementation, and the other requirements that we need. But it is a complex process covering procurement, property, IT, and other disciplines and other parts of the council, including, for example, education, who have an interest in the data that it contains. But we are looking to expedite it as best we can. But I'm also adamant that we need to land it properly, because that was one of the problems in the past, that although there was a system, it was not adequately implemented to be fully functional.
Do we have a sense of what the additional resources and time saving would be?
Not at this point in time.
I think it would be useful to get both those figures, because I wonder if Mr. Hodgson would want to comment on the suitability of our property database and where we're going with this.
Mark.
I would comment on the importance of having one to support the accounts and other areas of council activity. The specifics of which one would not fall, I don't think, within my remit. That's more for Tom and Tony to comment on, as they are the ones procuring it.
Thank you, Mark. Tom, can you help us out on this one? Can we afford to put more money in?
It's certainly something we're looking at, and we did, and the committee will recall there was more detail on this item. We talked about it in some depth in January. So what we're reporting here is a continuation of that timescale, and certainly as I come into my new role, Tony and I will discuss the additional resource that's needed. From my first look, I'm not sure there's immediate savings to be made. It's a clear kind of investment case, really, and we do need to I've kind of emphasise the points that Tony's made around ensuring that we procure it correctly and that it's the right system and that it's properly implemented, because we have kind of attempted this before and it hasn't worked. The other points I'd make is, in the meantime, and we're conscious we're going to have to close this year's accounts without a fully functioning database, we're continuing to look at ways that we can manipulate and cleanse the data and perform checks as best we can with the systems and the monitoring processes we do have in place. But it's on the action plan, and it's a very active area of work.
Thank you, Tom. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to emphasise the fact that Mike's brought up. I can remember discussing this. It's got to be 4 years ago. It's got to be at least 4 years ago. But I think, was it Mr. McDonald, John McDonald, come to committee with some sort of paper on property and asset register and property and asset management. And at the time, I brought up the issue of K2, which we spent a lot of money on and hadn't been used. So 4 years later, we're still nowhere further. And this has been brought up time and time and time again. You cannot manage property, you cannot manage assets without the correct register or database. It's just impossible. And it's very frustrating that we're not further down the line. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Mike?
Thank you, Chairman. What I wonder is, as we go through the painful process of getting this installed, do we get any benefits for Mark and our finance people as we go, or does this all have to wait until we finally smash a bottle of whatever it is over the bows of this and get it fully launched at the last stage?
Are there any ongoing benefits is the question, Tony. Tom?
Well, there's ongoing benefits, but in terms of there are no early, off the top of my head, there's very little early benefit because we do have to go through a procurement process, identify the most suitable system, acquire that system, and make sure it's designed and implemented to suit the council. It's only once it's up and running that it will then deliver what we need it to. There's no sort of short-term fix or short-term benefits. It is a big ticket item and it's got to be landed correctly.
I know there's no need for me to tell you, but that has to be number one on our priority list. And
I give in, Chairman.
Yep, acutely aware of that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's push on then. Next recommendation.
Okay.
That was 3, by the way, where we started on them.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So moving to recommendation 5, a unique property code on the ERP finance system for each property. We're just working through that with finance colleagues at the moment as the most appropriate method of doing it. Whilst there is a potentially obvious benefit to having a code, we need to link it to the ERP and finance processes. So, for example, properties are currently uniquely identified in terms of the debt recovery process for a separate system. So we are doing that. It's not straightforward. Unfortunately, I can't explain the ERP process, but we need to make sure that that additional work produces a suitable outcome and benefit. But it's very much in hand. Recommendation 6, review of all the invoicing in previous years, which has been completed. And then a rental agreement spreadsheet pending the database. We have a master spreadsheet that has been updated, and we are now got a rolling program of verification of that. So that is ongoing and in hand, and we will have a rent run process next month where we will ensure that that goes through accurately and re-verify it before and after the rent run. Recommendation 7 is in relation to setting up a subscription process for each tenant on the ERP system. Again, we're in discussions with finance colleagues to set that up, and we think.
Could you explain subscription system, please?
This was a request by the auditors, which I think was to essentially automate the rent processes, so that rather than manually entering each rent at each half year, there is a recurring invoice on a 6-monthly basis for each of the tenants.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's again a process of working through the ERP system. To do that, we believe we have now identified a suitable mechanism for doing it, and are in the process of setting that up. Recommendation. This is the recommendation that we charge interest on all debts. As we discussed this on the 5th of March, we will take a informed approach to the application of interest on all debts, and will be in the process of updating our policy so there is a clear policy, including categorization on how we treat interest in relation to debts. So that particular item is yet to start. Recommendation 9, formal policy on debt management. So this is updating the existing policy and ensuring it's aligned with the council's wider debt management policy. That is now completed. However, there was an issue raised by Councillor Shellens in relation to this item to ensure that there was no overlap between the work of the Farms Estate team and particularly the automated processes from the debt management team. We're just working through the fine details of that and hope to have it completed shortly, so that on the one hand, the farms team are talking to a tenant, on the other, they're receiving a letter from our system. So that's the main part of that is complete, and we're just fine tuning. Recommendation 10, in relation to advertising new tenancies, a new policy has been drafted, and we're just fine tuning that. We've also had a query in relation to pre-warning potential tenants regarding properties that are coming up. We have considered that, and the reason we don't pre-warn more than a week or two in advance is that it generates large numbers of inquiries for the farms team prior to there being marketing materials and things available, which just clearly becomes a direction away from their core duties. So we don't, unfortunately, pre-warn because of the amount of non-work or non-productive work that it creates for us. Recommendation 12 is regarding an update to the application form. The application form has been updated to cover both agricultural and non-agricultural tenancies, and we are presenting that to the County Farms Working Group. So it has been updated previously, but we're taking it for sign-off to the working group. Recommendation 13 was in relation to the evaluation criteria. They've been updated and reviewed, and they will be subject to an equality impact assessment to make sure there is no issues in respect of that. And we hope to have that done in the next month or so. And there's further commentary there on our approach to tenancies. One point to update is that there was a question on the 5th of March regarding subletting, where I advised that to my knowledge, there was no or limited subletting. There is a very limited amount of subletting within the County Farms estate, which is subject to landlord's approval. That relates to specialist cropping such as potatoes, which is entirely normal within the agricultural industry, and also where there is a surplus of cottages within the farm's tenancy, and the tenants can agree with ourselves to sublet those to persons outside their business, and there is a revenue split between the tenant and the landlord in respect of those subletting. So that's a correction on that point. Recommendation 17 in relation to interest rates and the fact that we charge and have written into our tenancies, agricultural tenancies, we have a rate of 9%. We're currently just discussing with internal audit and finance regarding the legal issues and the application of that interest rate and any alignment with wider council policies. So we'd previously closed that on the basis that we'd used that interest rate for many years and been successful in applying it. However, we have reopened that to work through this, as I say, with audit and finance colleagues to get clarity from their perspective. Recommendation 19 is essentially providing formal guidance based on the RICS and CAAV guidance on rent reviews. That is yet to be started, but we are still on target to complete that by June of this year. Recommendation 20, formal policy on rent abatement. We're currently reviewing and updating that process, and that's due to be completed by next month. Recommendation 21, again live, this is an update of the capital investment procedure in making decisions on any capital investments in farm tenancies, and that is on target for May and very much in hand. Capital investment procedure being updated in relation to business cases, runs in parallel with the previous item, but will take slightly longer as we need to tie it in with wider council processes, but still on target for July 2021. And then recommendation 24, yet to be started in terms of getting legal advice in relation to repayment charges. This item will be started in the near future, and we will get specialist agricultural advice because we believe there are specific issues in terms of changing the way we currently secure repayment due to the application of agricultural legislation. But again, that's on target for July 2021. And then recommendation 27 is the housing standard. That housing standard has now been drafted and is being presented to the County Farms Working Group tomorrow, hopefully for approval. And if so, that will be covered off prior to the target date of June 2021. Chair, I can pause there or continue if committee prefers into the closed items.
Any questions so far? Any thoughts lingering? Should we go into the closed items? Nice short, punchy.
Okay, so recommendation 2, was a comprehensive review of the Farms Estate strategy that was completed by CNI in February 2020. Recommendation 11 was in relation to the application form and declaration of any connection to the council. That was already in place and has been for some time, so that is closed. The recommendation 14 in relation to competitive bidding processes for rents, we have a clear process around that, and we've updated the process to include details of where we ask bidders for tenancies to rebid or represent their rental proposals. Recommendation 15 in relation to succession tenancies. As per the February 2020 strategic review, there is a clear policy in place in relation to succession tenancies. So that one is closed. Recommendation 16 was the contrary to that, to not have succession tenancies. So that's closed because it contravenes the previous recommendation and the existing agreed strategy. Recommendation 18 regards to this was the application of a revised approvals and sign-off process aligned to Peterborough Authority. That one is closed because it's not been actioned. We are still continuing to follow the Cambridgeshire County Council Constitution and schemes of authorisation. Recommendation 23 is to immediately cease retrospectively funding tenants' works. That has been in place for some time and is closed. So we've agreed that will not take place. Recommendation 25, ensuring that improvement charges are separately recorded. Well, the two items 25 and 26, ensuring that improvement charges are recorded on the rental master spreadsheet, and 26, which is that those improvement charges are recorded separately from the rent. Both of those have been actioned and are complete. Recommendation 28 related to clear division of duties between architect and officers in relation to considering projects and project costs. That has been part of the policy for some time and is agreed and completed. Recommendation 29 around specifications of works, again agreed and completed and has been actioned. And recommendation 30 in relation to the previous 2018 outcome focused review, which was superseded by the statutory review in 2020, so that's complete. And recommendation 31 in relation to future reviews, that is agreed and completed, in that we will obviously support any future reviews of the farm service. So that's all the recommendations, Chair.
So thank you, Tony. Councillor Bates, Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Tony. I think it would be useful just to say thank you to the staff that have been working on this since we last met. I think Tony's gone through all those recommendations, so I think it's just a bit of a thank you very much for your work to date, and please pass on work to other colleagues that have been helping you, Tony, please, and Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Appreciate it, and yeah, the staff have been working hard, and we've still got a lot of work to do.
Tom, I see you're a cohort with Tony on this particular agenda item. Anything you'd like to say or follow up on?
Nothing further from me, and to just echo those thanks to Tony and the team. Thank you.
I have a couple of other questions coming now, Mike, followed by Graham.
Can we take Graham first, Chairman?
Go ahead, Graham. You want to go first?
Okay, thanks, Terry. And I wanted to go back to the paper that this was an appendix to, and section 2.3 concerning the special meeting that we've got on Friday. Just to prepare ourselves, I'm hoping that the intention of that meeting is to agree a summary of the rest of the Mazars report that can be put into the public domain concerning the other 11 recommendations, and that the draft document that we've been sent in confidence will form the basis of that. Is that your intention, Chair?
That is my intention, and in fact, you've just stolen my thunder. I was going to say what you just said very quickly, yes. To remind you, the actual meeting starts at 10, but the Chief Executive have asked for a pre-meeting starting at 9. And
just to confirm, although you're anticipating that we might need to hold part of that meeting in private, the outcome of it will be a summary report along the lines of the draft we've seen. That's what you're saying?
That is our intention, yes. I say our intention because obviously before any thing can go public, it has to be cleared through the legal system and the chief executive.
Okay, is that going to take long to do, and does it have to go backwards and forwards to Roger Hickford and his legal advisors?
And what about PERDA?
That is the problem that we face at the moment. I'm seeking at the moment direction from the chief executive. I've asked that particular question, and the feedback I'm getting, I've got to be very careful with what I say now. The feedback what I'm getting from Fiona is that basically she says, how long is a piece of string, in that we're now dependent upon the response we get from the solicitor of the particular councillor concerned. I can't say more than that at the moment, Graham, if I may hold you to that.
Well, okay, except that councillor's name is already in the.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm just carrying on as I've been speaking. and Councillor Hickford, yes, I'll say it now. You know, I'm not. You know,
and as Fiona is on this call, does that imply that we have to wait until Councillor Hickford's solicitors have reviewed the draft report before it could be published?
Mr. Chairman, surely this is all got to be discussed later on in this week.
It's going to be discussed on Friday. I don't think, Fiona, you have anything more to add, do you?
No, we will be discussing this at Friday's meeting, not today.
That is when it should be discussed, Mr. Chairman.
I agree with
today's
you,
meeting. Thank you.
I am trying to be fair, but that is the answer, Graham. We'll discuss it on Friday. Thank you, Mike.
Just to follow up there, Chairman, Friday or Monday of following Friday is the last day before PERDA is announced. If Graham's document is not cleared before then, does that document have to wait until after the election?
Good question. I'd have to seek the advice of Fiona, I'm afraid. Fiona?
I think Councillor Shellens were anticipating something will be released on Friday.
That would be very welcome. But if I go back, if I may, Chairman, to the reason I put up my hand, we have some experience in, for those of us with long memories in audit and accounts, of a previous exercise that ended up with a wodge of recommendations. And we had a very careful process to ensure that none of them got dropped through the passage of time. And those of us who were there may remember the advent of smiley faces, and I won't explain. What proposals do we have to make sure that we don't lose any of the 31 recommendations? That's my question, part A. I've got a part B to come.
Well, I'm quite sure come Friday, we as a committee will make and take a decision as to regard what the follow-up actions will be, considering the situation that we find ourselves in, i.e. an election at the beginning of May. And quite a few of us won't be here to take follow-up action. So I think it's on the committee to lay down a form of agenda that should be followed after we have departed the council, so to speak, to make sure that any actions required are followed through.
Thank you. This has been a tortuous and complicated exercise, and Agreed. Some of us have scars. But if I were in my previous position, and were I not proposing to sit at home showing a fine seam and dilly-dilly and all that, I would ask for a further sweep-up review in about a year's time. And I would feel very happy if we were to recommend that to the forthcoming team. And I lay that before you, Chairman.
Can I say, can we answer that request on Friday, when I'm sure that is the intention of that meeting, to formulate how we advance beyond May. So if you'd like to forward that on Friday, I'm quite sure it would be acceptable. Good. Well, I have no further hands. Tony, Tom, I know you're presenting the next agenda item, Tom, but I'll thank you on behalf of the committee for all the effort that you've put in so far. And I look forward to Friday afternoon. Although I don't know whether you'll be there, Tony, because that's more of a legal side than an administration side. But thank you very much for all the hard work and all the hard work of your officers. And I'm quite sure the whole of the committee will endorse that.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll pass that on. Yeah.
Much appreciated. Okay. Requirement is that we endorse this follow-up report. Are we all agreed? Thank you. Could I now turn to agenda item number 7, and that is the financial reporting and update. Tom, I think you're leading on this one.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We have a couple of colleagues from EY for this item as well, and then a couple of colleagues from the finance team. If I could take the committee, first of all, actually start at the end of the report and take the items in reverse order, if that's okay. So page 33, first of all, this is the value for money opinion on the 2017-18 financial year. We have had a request from BDO for some further information in relation to that, which the council has responded to. When we drafted the report, we were anticipating some output, a draft report back from BDO. That hasn't arrived as yet, which is disappointing, and the committee may want to consider whether it's timely to write again formally to BDO to stress the council's desire to see that concluded. Moving upwards, section 2, we now have confirmation on the timescales for next year, and that the draft publication of accounts is by the 31st of July. As the committee knows, there's been a large number of authorities across the country struggling with the timescales, and the Redmond's review has looked at the kind of wider systemic issues contributing to that. Adjusting the timescales is one of the responses, but what that does leave next year is quite a short period in which audit would need to take place, and certainly looking at the proposed timescales and EY's need to phase audits across the region, we're likely to be in a position where we do need to publish a notice to explain where we are with our audit come the autumn. And that will kind of bring us back into compliance with the regulations. Those extended timescales, I think, do enable the council to put additional work into kind of quality assurance up front to get a quality set of accounts in the first place. We gave a fuller update at the last meeting, or the last substantive meeting, on the preparations for the accounts for this year. And we draw attention in this report to the process for property valuations for next year, which are underway. They're predominantly external valuations, given the circumstances of the pandemic this year, and also underway with the looking at the accruals and purchase order process to ensure that's as smooth as possible. And then section 1, last year's accounts. This has been the most time-consuming aspect since the committee last received an update in January, and completing those final stages. The reasons, or the main areas requiring attention, are set out in 1.2 and 1.3. We're pleased that we've received the audit results report from Ernst & Young last week. That's been circulated to the committee as an additional late item, and does signal the culmination of the audit. With that was an additional cover sheet, which we're looking to revise the recommendations made to the committee today. So continuing to note the report, an additional recommendation 2 to receive the external auditor's results report, and number 3 to reconfirm delegation to the Chief Finance Officer and the Chairman of this committee to sign the final statement of accounts and make related declarations, taking account of the adjustments agreed with the auditor and set out in that report from EY. The results report also contains the management representation letter in draft form, and the chair will need to co-sign that along with the chief finance officer as part of those final procedures. EY may want to go into a bit more detail about the contents of their report in that addendum. I would just briefly draw the committee's attention to page 4 and 5 of that. First of all, you'll see that most of the areas there's actually no update in the position since November, reflecting the progress made up to November. But it has been the property valuation area, which of course is the highest value, where most of the work has been focused over the last few weeks and months. And then in page 13 and onwards from there, the listing of adjustments resulting from that, some of which, it has to be said, are quite high value and are material changes, but we would, it's worth stressing that as is often the case with the accounts, they are kind of issues really of classification or where they affect valuation, go through the unusable reserves, and they don't have a bearing on the resources available to the council in terms of spending on services. And then the final update from where we were in November and January time is the going concern assessment. At one stage, we'd expected an emphasis of matter on that from the auditor, but because of the extra grants and the additional certainty we've got about next year's budget, the going concern position looks stronger, and I think it's less likely there will be an emphasis of matter. Yeah, that's probably all I can say in introduction. We are, as I say, very close to the final stages now, and well set, I think, to having sign off later this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. No doubt the members will have questions, but Mark, would you like to comment and report accordingly, please?
Thank you, Chair. Certainly. So there's a few bits I'd add around what Tom has said by way of introduction. So our update report is really a bridge to bridge the timeline from our formal report back in November to today. We have concluded all of our testing areas, and we have drawn conclusions against all of them, and we have set out our findings where we have not previously reported them within this addendum update. So we are now in a position to sign the audit opinion when we get the updated, full revised set of accounts, hopefully later this week, as Tom says. Excuse me. So I think the biggest area to focus on is around property, plant and equipment, as Tom says, and that has been the main reason for the delay and resolving all the issues in relation to that testing. And you can see by the quantum of audit differences, the significance of the issues that we've had, some of which have already been discussed this afternoon. So around the basis of valuation, the data to support the basis of valuation, and indeed some incorrect inputs to calculations for valuations. And at £165 million worth of net audit differences, that equates to a 10% error rate on the total property, plant and equipment balance at the 31st of March. But when you focus that down onto land and buildings, that's almost 20% error rate on land and building value. As Tom says, we have updated our work around going concern because it is at a point in time, and that point in time is 12 months from the date of authorisation of the accounts. And clearly a lot has happened since November in terms of local government settlement, the national roadmap out of the current lockdown, and indeed additional COVID funding that has come the way of the council. So management have updated their assessment, and we have reviewed that. And as Tom says, as a result, we don't believe that it is necessary to include an emphasis of matter within our audit report anymore, and we are therefore taking that out. In terms of other adjusted differences, the full list is in the section as Tom sets out. In aggregate, those do amount to £336 million. But to reiterate Tom's clarification, some of those are classification. A number of them go through unusable reserves in relation to property, plant and equipment valuations, and therefore they don't hit the bottom line, if you like, and don't have an impact on the council taxpayer when they are reversed out as accounting practice requires. And we have just updated our request for a letter of representation given the elapsed time since November because it is date sensitive. So just for completeness, I did update that and include a copy of it within the back half of that report. Just for members noting, in relation to the pension fund audit, there are no changes or updates to the audit results report that we took and presented to you in November because the audit was fully complete and reported at that point in time. But we will be issuing the unqualified opinion on the pension fund alongside the County Council set of accounts later this week or in the early part of next week. Again, happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Much appreciated. Mike, Councillor Shellings.
Thank you, Terry. First of all, I'd like to express, I hope on behalf of the whole committee, our thanks to the little pixies that sit up at midnight sorting out all these numbers, which takes a phenomenal amount of time and a lot of effort. And they have to study arcane differences between this and that none of us outside of that small group understand, and they do it very well. And I'm extremely grateful. I'm also pleased to hear that the going concern issue is not going to cause us difficulties. I think we do need to take a view about what to do about BDO. They have been a complete pain to deal with, and we just need to have this finished. I heard Tom say that he hopes to get sign off by the end of the month. I've heard that before, attached to different months. How confident are we, Tom?
This time I would say 90% confident. It's as Mark says, it's a big step forward in that the audit has finished. We now just need to feed all of those adjustments, and as we've heard, they are quite sizable and numerous back through our process in the accounts. That depends a bit on the system and capacity, and then if we can't get that done in a timely way this week, there's people's availability going into the Easter holidays, but it's a big hurdle to have completed the audit side of the process. So as confident as I've ever been, I think I'd say.
So Terry, you've got your pen sharpened, have you? Good.
It's a pencil with a rubber on the end.
Right. You've been here before, haven't you? I have heard from other authorities, and I think it also applies here, that part of the delay in process, which we were expecting to end the other side of Christmas at one stage, has been late questions. And I think it would be helpful, away from the glare of publicity in a committee meeting, if there could be an informal chat between EY and our finance team to try and second guess what new wonderful questions they're going to identify this year, or next year rather. And some of that they may be able to rely on examples that they've picked up because of their wide range of local authority work that they do elsewhere. So I just make that suggestion to try and expedite the completion of future audits. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mike, and can I thank you again for all the hard work you put in when, as Chairman, previously in this particular adventure, I will call it, because it has been a long-running adventure as far as I think we're all concerned. I do have just two observations and comments to make, and I'm not going into detail, but one, I must stress, BDO, Tom, where do we go from here? They're not fit for purpose as far as I'm concerned, and I'm turning to Mark now. Can we go to the very highest authority and stress our feelings on this matter? Because it is to come back now and say we need further evidence as far as two items are concerned after 3 years, I just find unacceptable. I'm not just I'm astounded, to be honest, and disheartened. That's the other factor.
Yeah, I think there are very fair comments, Chairman. It does feel like we're progressing still, albeit not at the pace that anyone would want. And I think you know, we have escalated it within BDO's own kind of complaint procedure and to PSAA, who are the contract holder. I think I think it would be timely to consider that Lisa Clampin, the lead partner, wrote back setting out a timescale at the beginning of the autumn. And I think we are now a couple of months adrift from that timescale. So I think a formal letter again from the committee to make that point, copying in PSA and the kind of internal review procedure at BDO is the only option we have available to us, really.
We can't take this up the line. I mean, to government, I feel we should be knocking on their door. I mean, that's my feeling. I just find it astounding. If I may go back again, every time as a committee, we've sat here for the last 4 years, and I'm going to steal a little bit, I think, of Peter's thunder, a previous agenda item. He said, we've always had this property, plant and equipment problem. I've tried to identify that, and obviously Mark and his team has picked that up again. I understand it can happen once or twice, but nearly 3 years on a run, where have we gone wrong?
Yeah, I think there's colleagues may want to comment on this further, but I think there's we haven't tended to have recurrence of the same issues each year. Now, the nature of property is that they are the highest value items. It's always going to be an area that attracts additional attention. So selecting, Mark was quoting very high figures as part of the adjustment. I think the largest single adjustment we've got this year is 160 million in relation to schools, and that split of developed and undeveloped land. Now, that isn't an issue we've had before. The council's appointed valuer has taken one professional view, and to some extent they may be able to sustain that opinion, but it isn't in compliance with the RICS guidance, which EY have rightly pointed to. So I think we can point to different individual issues each year. Some of those are very high value and quite isolated in their impact, but there are some thematic points as well. And we talked a bit earlier about the property asset database and the kind of quality control checks the council needs to do. And we continue to progress those each year, and we've set up a further process for the property team to kind of oversee the quality of that input back from our valuer next year. It'll be our second year with this valuer, but I take the point that it is an area for continuous improvement.
Mike, if you put your hand up again, I'm not quite sure. Mike, thank you. Please.
PSAA sent me a questionnaire prior to recent events that you will understand. And I simply put against BDO abysmal. And I wonder if it's a question now of going to MHCLG and just reporting our issues with this. We've previously tried to do it nicely because we didn't want an adverse audit report from BDO dealing with previous years, but I think we've perhaps run out of that now. So that's the first point. Secondly, can I emphasize the point that's just been made, that for next year we will be keeping the same valuers, which means that we will not have the problem, some of the issues that we had this year, which caused an element of delay. I need to talk to Fiona, I suspect, Chairman, or through you to Fiona. In the event that BDO do produce something during the PERDA period, I wonder whether it would be possible for this committee to meet under conditions of strict confidentiality, just to deal with the BDO issue, because there's a lot of history here, and a new committee coming in with none of the background would, I think, struggle. So I postulate that problem. And one of the people I noticed that I hadn't thanked in my earlier comments was EY. Even though we fight like cats from time to time, we also actually get on quite well, better than it has been my experience with other auditors. So For that relief, much thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Well, Tom, you've heard what the previous chairman has said about BDO. I think we should progress this as high as we can. And similarly, I appreciate we got a repeat with the value in 2 years. I hope that works out. We're doing that. I've got no other questions. Does anybody else? If not, can I add my thanks to those of Councillor Shellings, Mark, for all the hard work you've put in. We feel quite subjugated at times, but I can assure you we do appreciate your keeping us on the straight and narrow. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair.
I now understand, Dawn, we've got an extended recommendation. If you could read that out for me, I'll be much appreciated. And then I'll get it right rather than try and cock it up. Sorry, I'll try and make a mess of it.
Thank you, Chairman. In addition, the main recommendation is that the committee is appraised of the progress with the statement of accounts for the year ending 31st of March 2020, preparations for the year-end process for 2020 to 21, national updates and context and other connected matters. And then we note the committee notes the addendum, the late papers, receives the external auditor's results report, and reconfirms delegation to the Chief Finance Officer and Chairman of the committee to sign the final statement of accounts and make any related declarations taking account of the adjustments agreed with the auditor and set out in EY's report.
Fine. Well, those are the recommendations. Are we all agreed? Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you, Mark. Are you staying with us, Mark, to hear about the audit plan?
I am. Yes, thank
Excellent.
you.
Thank you, Tom. Have a good afternoon.
And we should say thank you to Michelle as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, thank you. And best of luck with the small problem that might be facing you in the near future, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to go into agenda item number 8, which is the draft internal audit plan. And obviously Neil is here to present that. But before that, would you be happy if I take a 5-minute interlude? I think I need one, and if everybody's agreed, I can't see anybody objecting. Can I suggest then we meet back here at 3:25 and start with Neil, and I think we've probably round up the afternoon with the safer recruitment to school, but that shouldn't take too long. Okay, 5 or 6 minute break. Thank you very much. Please turn off your microphones and please turn off your video.
You're muted, Chair.
Thank you, Dawn. If you're back and willing, as they say, you'd like to turn on your videos and we'll start the rest of the meeting. There we go. I think we're all back now, Dawn.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Neil, we're in your capable hands, ready when you are for the draft internal audit plan 21-22.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this item is, we're asking Audit and Accounts is requested to consider and comment on the contents of the report and approve the proposed 21-22 audit plan and approach, subject to any changes obviously made at this meeting. Firstly, it may give members context to outline the approach in arriving at the draft internal audit plan for 21-22. This year, we've used a risk-based approach to prioritise internal audit work to ensure that we include sufficient coverage to get an evidence-based assurance opinion on the control environment at the end of the year. Ongoing audit planning throughout the year creates a service that's highly responsive in nature, and all efforts will be made to maximise coverage to provide the most effective and agile internal audit service possible that maintains a constant focus on the key risks facing the organisation throughout the year. So what we're really trying to say is that rather than setting an audit plan fixed in stone in February, we're going to come back to JMT and the Audit and Accounts Committee each quarter to agree the next quarter's work. I think the pandemic has very clearly shown us that actually it's very difficult to forecast the next week, never mind the next year, and that organisational risk changes dramatically in this ever-changing environment. And the truth is, it's been like that for a number of years. So we're really formalising now what we've been trying to do over a number of years. The approach is expected to bring a number of benefits. We have a greater flexibility to introduce new audits and reschedule planned audits in line with current emerging risks. There should be a reduced need to cancel audits at the end of a year. They'll simply be rolled forward to the next quarter, or the most appropriate quarter. So therefore we're no longer restrained and constrained by a sort of a false year-end cut-off date. We'll have an improved targeting of resource to areas of greater risk, as I've already articulated. If we're coming every quarter to GMT and to the Audit and Accounts Committee, we'll have a very clear steer from the key decision makers and key risk owners of the organisation as to where they perceive the current risk to be. And it'll also ensure that when changes are made to the audit plan, the impact of those changes is better understood by the Audit Committee and by GMT. So the first 3 months' work is outlined in the report, and then what we've put in there is also the following 4 quarters. I was challenged on how we can have 5 quarters at the chair's brief, so I've changed it to the first 3 months and the next 4 quarters. So what you have is a 15-month pipeline of work, and that will be refreshed for approval at each Audit and Accounts Committee cycle. I don't wish to go too much more into it, Chair, but to invite questions and challenge.
Thank you, Neil. Brief, short and concise. Any questions? No questions. As I said previously, Chair, I applaud this initiative. I think it's going to lead to a very dynamic approach towards audit. And obviously you'll be able to change your thrust and parry the occasional thrust towards you. But no, I fully endorse it, this particular move that you choose to do. I see, Graham, you have a question?
Yes, and apologies if I've missed this, Neil, but you talk about review of the corporate risk register and horizon scanning. How would we respond to a natural or man-made disaster, and you've already mentioned the pandemic, is there any auditing that is worth doing of how we responded to the pandemic and how we would respond if we had a big flood or a drought or something else which really took a lot of resources from the county council and diverted us from other services?
An excellent question, and the answer is yes. We do it in two ways. First of all, through the risk register. We also have an overview on the council's risk register, the corporate risk register, that you'll see on the next item. There's an update to the risk register, but in direct response to an audit of that area, it would be probably an audit of business continuity arrangements. So we would look to see, well, should the worst happen be a pandemic or any other crisis, but caused by whatever, that temporarily or temporarily or longer curtails the ability of the organisation to fulfil its obligations and deliver the services that it needs to deliver, then there must be a business continuity plan and a disaster recovery plan in place, so that we're not flummoxed on day one. So you can take the extreme perhaps of a contract, well, not extreme, but a contractor going bust. So saying one of our key contractors delivering a key service disappears overnight, what would the plan be to continue providing that service? And where we audit the business continuity plans to ensure that we know the answer to that. In terms of other areas, of course, you've got the emergency planning unit, which are probably the first line of defence should any natural disaster happen at short notice. So we do audit those two areas. I think business continuity planning is in the 15-month plan. I don't think emergency planning is.
Thank you, Neil. Ian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully you can hear me. One very small question, which is under disabled facility grants. Aren't they given by the district councils? I'm not clear what you're going to be doing there. It's a fairly minor point. Okay. What I want to go back to is what happened a year ago when we went into our first lockdown. And a lot of staff in a lot of areas were redeployed at libraries, highways, etc., etc. And I think the consequences of those in some areas, it can be quite significant, because it was quite a long time that people were seconded to do other things, and they did a good job at doing them. That's not the question, really. It's the consequences of that, Neil, which I'll give you a good example. I look after highways. We had 83, 85 staff seconded, and they weren't doing their day job, okay, which we all understand, okay. I'm not clear within your audit plan how you might pick that up. I'm quite happy, Mr. Chairman, for you perhaps to take away and think about that, but that's concerned me a little bit, because inevitably things got put on the back burner, and I think that's perhaps something we need to take. I'm not sure how that can be encapsulated with an audit, but it's something I think perhaps one needs to consider. But I'm content for you, with the chairman and with Neil, to perhaps and with the help of finance people, to perhaps bring back something. Not too much discussion, I think, at the moment, as far as I'm concerned. But two questions, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Neil?
I'm happy to take those both away if that's okay, Councillor Bates. You just disappeared. Sorry, you were there a minute ago. Yeah, sorry. The second one is interesting. You looking at highways in particular. I mean, there's a very easy-ish answer to that, and that if the work wasn't undertaken during the course of the year by the highways contractor, then they won't have incurred the actual cost that we would expect them to incur. So that there would be a slight underspend on that particular budget, and the impact would be that the work would be reprioritised and carried forward into future years. It's probably a very simplistic answer, but we would have expected to see on some of the major contracts if the subcontractors, for example, have not been employed. So the direct labour force would probably have either been furloughed or been paid, but subcontractors shouldn't have been paid if they weren't doing the work. So we would expect to see some underspend in areas such as the highways contracts. And we will be looking at that when we're doing our contract audit reviews over the course of the next few months. Obviously to ensure we haven't been monies haven't been over recovered from us.
Thank you, Neil. I have one question, if I may, and on page 43, 152, you talk about the core plan costing 882 days and the flexible plan 865 days, roughly 50-50. I'm a little bit surprised in that. I thought the core plan might be a little bit larger than that. Is that an incorrect assumption, or am I mean, you're the expert in this particular field. It just surprised me that it was 50-50.
I think if you threw that plan at most people on this call and also most auditors, they would probably come up with a different subjective view of what core was and what flexible would be. I know some heads of audit would say, actually, it's all core. Everything that's in there is core. What we try to differentiate between is the jobs that we absolutely have to do. We know exactly where they are, how many days we expect to spend on it. Whereas we have flexible jobs where we're more than likely to do a job in that particular area. We're just not exactly sure what that particular job would be. And that can be flexed by JMT or the audit committee, or obviously the chief internal auditor throughout the course of the year. Let me try and find an example. I can go down. So I think under the flexible audit plan, we've got the highways contract there, 50 days. Now, I could probably argue that is core. However, we wouldn't expect to have to put 50 days in to the highways contract every single year. If we spend 50 days on it this year, hopefully we'll get we'll have recommendations in place to improve governance and make the necessity for open book review audit less important in future years. So can then go on to project assurance. We haven't identified which projects we're going to go and give an assurance on yet, but we know that it's a core risk to the organisation if we don't do some work in those areas. So the flexibility is around the actual names rather than the theme, if that helps or makes sense.
Flexibility is the word then, the key word.
Yes, yeah. It's at the moment we don't know which projects we'll be asked to go and look at, but we're fairly sure that during the course of the year, JMT will identify some projects and say, can you go and have a review of that particular area?
Okay. I see no further questions. Therefore, as the recommendation already outlined by Neil, is that consider and comment on the contents of the report. I think we're all agreed this hopefully will be a vast improvement on what has happened in the past, although I must say, Neil, the service you've given us in the past has been pretty good as far as I've been concerned. Are we all agreed then, please? I see nobody has disagreed, so that recommendation is taken. Thank you very much indeed. Can we therefore move on to...
For that, I will pass that back.
Thank you, much appreciated. Agenda item number 8, draft internal audit plan. Sorry, I got that wrong. Agenda item number 9, internal audit progress report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the committee's asked to note and comment on the report. This is the report that the committee gets each meeting, and it's a progress report on the work we've done in the previous quarter. I think the key things to say or the key thing to say in this particular quarter is the work to date is on target to ensure an evidence-based opinion can be given, which is the main outcome of internal audit, is to give a chief internal audit opinion on the internal control environment or governance of the organisation. We have received assurances that the key financial system reviews that are being completed by colleagues based at Milton Keynes and Northamptonshire will be at final report stage by the 31st of March. It's the 23rd yet, and we have 8 days. I'm expecting to get them in at draft stage, certainly. I think the final report may be just a little bit later than that, but that's positive. At 2.7, I think we've previously talked a lot about the highways contract open book review. That's likely to be carried forward into the next financial year, as you saw from the flexible plan. We've just discussed it. The contractor had advised that the first tranche of prime record data that was requested would be forwarded to the audit team by the 19th of March, i.e. last Friday. Data was received on the due date, but since that time, in fact this morning, the contractor has advised this now requires some updating, and they will be forwarding some more information later on this week. So it's positive in that we are getting some data, but it's disappointing that we haven't been able to complete that within the year as we hoped.
May I pick up something there, Chairman?
Yes, please, Mike.
We've previously had some quite significant sums discussed in regard to this review. Does Neil have any sense at all about the likelihood of the size of any future sums to be transferred?
It's really hard to say, Chair, at this stage until I've seen the data. You know, I can't even hazard a guess. However, I would expect that the outcome of the open book review would be, you know, an overpayment or underpayment by the contractor. I think there will need to be an adjustment. The information we've got so far on staffing costs shows a reasonably close correlation between the amounts that have been charged and the amounts that the contractor is putting forward as their direct costs supported by prime records. As yet, we haven't audited the prime records to see whether or not what's been presented is accurate. So it would be I would be unable to give any advice, I'm afraid, on that.
Chairman and Fiona, in the event that information becomes available to Neil during PERDA, it's a repeat of an earlier question, could that information be made available to committee members on strict understanding of confidentiality so that they can give a steer to the incoming Audit and Accounts Committee as to things that they might find interesting?
Thank you, Mike. Fiona, bearing in mind the confidential nature of what we're discussing at the moment, in the past, can we bring this up on Friday probably and see whether we can include that in the recommendation for future review?
Thank you. And a further point, Chairman, I think this is quite straightforward. The contract is currently with Skanska. That is now being transferred to another company. It may or may not be called M. And the contract is to undergo novation. Can I assume that in the event of any financial transfers being required as a result of the work that Neil does, that the terms of those transactions will be unaffected by the change of ownership?
I can't give that assurance, but I can give you the assurance.
Was that can or can't?
Governance.
Sorry, Neil.
I cannot give you that. Sorry, I cannot give you that assurance personally. But what I can say is that I'm aware that the governance procedures you'd expect to be in place are in place, i.e. our legal team, the council's taking legal advice as to some specifications to be put in the novation agreement between it is actually the current highways contractor and its M Group. So the novation agreement in the round gives you that assurance, but we're asking for something belt and braces over and above that to say actually this piece of work is going on, and should a liability occur from this, then that will be that will be honoured. So there's a general novation agreement, as I understand it. Fiona's probably in a better position to advise on that, but I am aware that we're asking for a separate appendix to that novation agreement that specifically references this piece of work and any liability arising therefrom.
Fiona, I wonder if you have any comments.
I don't think I can usefully add much more to what Neil's already said. I'm afraid, Councillor Shellens, on this one.
Thank you, Fiona. Ian, you have a question?
More of a hopefully the novation has happened, okay, between Cambridgeshire County Council, which is the Skanska. My understanding in that novation, there are quite a few other novations which need to happen around, I think about 22 other councils which are in a similar position to ourselves. My suggestion really to assist Mike actually is perhaps ask Neil to talk to Steve Cox and Emma Murden on that subject. My understanding is, if you like, there should be no change in the novation from Skanska into the new company. But my suggestion really, Mr. Chairman, is for Neil to talk to Steve Cox and Emma Murden on that subject, and perhaps they might be kind enough perhaps to give some briefing notes or through yourselves about where we are with that current contract.
Thank you, Ian. Very helpful.
Thanks.
But as far as I'm concerned, Mike, there is no change, and I have met the new, what I call the new owners. If you follow that, they did reassure me there will be no change, no change, no change. They kept on repeating that. Time will tell. In 6 months' time, okay, or a year's time is another question, Mike. But all I'm getting, I have no concerns as I sit here with you today.
Good.
At home today, even.
Right. Thank you.
Just to add to that, Chair, just to reassure you, Councillor Bates, I am in contact with both Steve Cox and Emma Murden, and it's through them I'm talking about this additional stipulation as part of the novation agreement. So they're the guys taking that particular issue forward. So I can reassure the committee that's happening. What I can't say is it has happened.
Okay. Thank you. Put your hand down, Ian. That'll be fine. Thank you very much. And Neil, as I see it, and a question or a statement perhaps, the correlation between this report and our previous reports and the change in your modus operandi, as I see it now, because the audit committee is endorsing your next 3 months' work, it will give the audit committee more clarity on how you're progressing on a 3 monthly basis, rather than a solid report coming back on an annual basis. I think that is a big advantage to change what you have done in the past to this new proposal. I think, is that the fair statement?
It's a very fair statement. I think sometimes by November, December, it's very difficult to say why we took a job out in April. And the simple facts are normally that job has been removed because the priorities have changed and something else was parachuted in. Doing that each quarter and getting approval for anything that's been removed from the plan, being rescheduled further down the line, and explaining why new jobs have come in, or having the opportunity to explain that is much more timely. And it gives both JMT and the audit committee a sort of a real-time feel for the work that internal audit is doing in advance, actually, because it's 3 months in advance.
Mike, another question?
Yes, Chairman, if I may. I read para 2.3, wrapped a wet towel around my head, still couldn't understand it, and gave up. Wait a minute. what we're doing is over committing jobs against the resources available, as I understand it. And this is supposed to allow some flexibility should planned work need to be rescheduled.
Yeah.
Can Neil just go through it one more time, and assuming I'm not very bright?
I will try, and I would assume it's that I'm not explaining it very well, as opposed to the opposite. Again, it relates back to the 15-month plan that I've articulated for the way forward, if you like. So in January, we've say got, I don't know, 300 days of resource available. However, we know that some of the jobs that we're planning to do, for all the right reasons, will not be undertaken in those 3 months. The director will ask us to delay that until April or May. So rather than just saying, well, these are our 300 days, and not being transparent with the committee about what we're hoping to do, we've over provided in that quarter.
So what happens if no projects get stalled?
They will then be just put risk-based, put into the next year's plan, so that they will drop into the next quarter. And actually, you'll see that some of the work is already in the next quarter from the previous item that you've approved, such as a highways contract, for example. All month we've been hoping to get on with the highways contract, but that hasn't happened because the information hasn't come in. So that's then being filled by other jobs being parachuted into the plan.
Good. Okay, thank you for that. 2.6 says we're going to get assurances on key financial systems being completed by colleagues based at Milton Keynes and Northampton. And I think you referred to this in your introductory comments, but are they on schedule?
I understand they are, and I will be chasing them up this week. I genuinely believe we'll probably not get the final reports. I think we'll get the draft reports. But the draft reports would be good before the 31st of March, because that would give the opinion that is required, the assurance that is required. Because draft reports and final reports tend not to change significantly. So I will chase those up again towards the back end of this week.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is to you or to Ian. Paragraph 4.4. In order to highlight the main issues identified within the internal audit reviews, more specifically the project assurance paper, major infrastructure project delivery, governance and risk management is being submitted to the Council's Highways and Transport Committee on the 9th of March. Did it? And if so, what did it say?
I mean, yes, it did. I have it. I've not got it on screen. Through Councillor Bates, I think it's a public document, so I can forward the link to members. But from the audit perspective, it was talking about the new governance framework that's being introduced and progress against that's being monitored by the project group. So from our perspective, it was a very positive piece of work, because it summarised the recommendations that we've made in the 4 deep dive capital programme reviews, and that's now been pulled together into an action plan that's being dealt with and proactively dealt with by the service, and giving more reassurance. Internal audit is actually represented on that implementation group.
Just to add, I think it has been passed. I think it would be sensible for it to be circulated, Mr. Chairman. It was well received in what I call governance and everything else about how we manage projects, and that was led by Steve Cox. Okay, and essentially, I think the report says it all. So I think the simple way is to ask.
Let's have the link. Let's have the link sent out, Ian. I think that's the quickest way. Can we have that done then, Neil and Don? Let's have the link forwarded, and people can pick up their own. Thanks very much, Ian.
Not quite, Chairman. As I understand it, there were 4 major reviews done, and some recommendations have emerged. those 4 reviews were selected, do we feel, or does Neil feel, that the recommendations out of those 4 reviews cover the extent of the changes that we might institute if we were to do another 4?
Yes, I think these, I think you're probably referring maybe back to Ely and the similar issues that we found at Ely. But I will certainly say that the 4 reviews that we did in the summer were as thorough a job as internal audit has done on capital programme work, and we were asked to do it by the director. So it was a proactive request and supported by JMT. And every recommendation that we've made has been taken forward, and if implemented, which I'm sure there will be, if complied with, which I hope there will be, if embedded, then I think it will be a major step forward for the organisation in how to manage major projects and contracts.
I think I'm making a slightly different point, Neil. I mean, I'm grateful for what you've said, and I think it sounds very positive. But we've selected 4 projects, we've looked at them, and we've identified X, Y, and Z improvements to be made. And everybody's agreed those, and they're going to institute them. Excellent. But if we had different projects, would we have the same comments? Are we missing something because we've not done other projects?
Sorry, I did misunderstand the question. I think if we did another 4 projects, we probably retrospectively at that time we would find exactly the same system recommendations. We would come out with the same recommendations. Each of the 4 reports had fairly generic recommendations about how to improve the.
Right, that was the question. Good, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you then. Happy, Mike?
Yep. Well,
Good,
I can qualify that.
I know you're never happy. I mean, that's an overstatement, isn't it? Yes, but there we go. Okay, thank you, everybody. I don't see any other hands up then. Looking through the report, I haven't any further questions to raise. Recommendation is the committee is asked to note and comment on the report. Are we all happy with that? Mike. Right. We'll take that as read then. Thank you very much. Let's turn to the next agenda item number 10. Neil again, Internal Audit Joint Working Protocol with Peterborough City Council.
I just relaxed there, Chair. I'd clearly forgotten about this particular item, but yes, this is to seek audit and accounts approval to the joint working protocol and suggested development proposals. Given the increasing integration between Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council services and management, internal auditors at both sites are progressively finding that our work, that their work have got applicability over common systems and processes that are shared across both sites. So the protocol really is around agreeing areas for shared audit plans, so to avoid duplication. That will also explore the potential to place increased assurance on work that's been completed by the other team. Obviously, so subject to the results of that work, additional compliance work may be necessary in each of the organisations on their own user data. But overall, that should reduce the sort of central system work duplication. It should also allow for a shared record of action tracking recommendation in joint areas. So if Peterborough do a piece of work that impacts upon a system that we jointly share and they have some recommendations, we would adopt those recommendations and follow them through and report them through this committee to ensure you're happy that governance is being proactively addressed. It will set standards as well to ensure improved service outcomes. We were working together, look at our team charters to see how we can further improve as audit sections and further develop our positive outcomes by sharing best practice and also exploring the possibilities for workforce development, i.e. through secondment. One of the benefits of a shared service is is the ability to utilise specialisms that teams in different areas have, for example, contract audit or IT audit or fraud, or actually if you just had experience in looking at a similar audit area. That's probably not the immediate goal, but over the period of time, as the relationships get stronger, we're hoping that some of those benefits would materialise. And just in way of conclusion to the introduction, I'm advised that its meeting last night, the Peterborough Audit Committee fully supported the proposal. And the reason why they got it first was just timing. Okay, obviously it has to come to both audit committees, and I would much have preferred it to come here first, but they beat us by 12 hours. Apologies.
Not to worry. That's it. Any comments, please? Graham.
Neil, there's no mention here of cost allocation. So I'm assuming they will get all the benefits from Peterborough for nothing, and we'll charge them an awful lot of money if they utilise any of your recommendations.
Here.
So if we just record that, and then the second point, on a slightly more pragmatic, looking at this, this is clearly a good thing to do, to share best practice with Peterborough. Is there already something within the audit world that people like EY and BDO and yourselves pick up good practice from other people, so that practitioners within the county council can learn lessons without you having to go through an in-depth audit review?
The simple answer to that is yes. It starts with the associate trainees studying for the SIPFA qualification, so they start to understand how good audit is undertaken, and would look at case studies to look at outcomes from positive audits. Each of the team, certainly at Cambridgeshire, has got a commitment towards what we call CPD, which is continuing professional development. So, we would, in our own time, attend lectures by other professionals. In my own right, I go and give, believe it or not, I actually give presentations to other groups, and sort of share best practice. We shamelessly look on Google and look at other local authorities' risk registers, and look at other authorities' audit reports, to make sure we are not missing anything. So the answer is yes. We've always done it, and we will continue to do it. But the partnership with Peterborough might help us develop our own team as well by different experiences.
And is this going to cost us any money?
No, I mean, Tom's on the group, so I would have to say no immediately. I mean, arguably, you should get more bang for your buck, because if Peterborough are doing work that we're also doing within the same organisation, there's a duplication. So it won't necessarily save money, but it should allow us to have more resource to target towards higher risk areas. So our 1,750 allocated days can stretch further and look at maybe more contracts. We would love to spend more time looking at contract audit, but we are driven by resource, obviously, and we can't possibly get to see every audit to make sure we're getting the outcomes. Sorry, every contract, to make sure we're getting the right outcomes from each of those contracts. So the benefit should be that ourselves and Peterborough have got more resource to target towards the risks of JMT, the organisation, and the audit committee.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Neil, just a short question from me. At the moment, we work with Northampton, Milton Keynes. So are we going to get a double spoke system, or are we going to combine, or what's happening?
At the moment, the direction of travel is that we're getting less shared service with Northampton from Milton Keynes. but it's expected that the core systems that were sort of previously LGSS, and then they may now be sort of led by one of the organisations, where, for example, payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable, where there's a central system, we will still share the audit of those shared systems. So we will still benefit from the shared service as it's going to pan out, hopefully. It's difficult to give more of a more thorough answer than that, because it's still being considered. But the direction of travel is that we will still share the work on the key financial systems, as I've articulated today.
So some of those key financial systems are paramount with what we're doing with Peterborough as well. How does that fit in? We're working with Peterborough. We're working with.
Yeah. So I don't think Peterborough share the payroll system, for example. So we wouldn't be sharing payroll audit with Peterborough, but we'll be sharing the payroll audit with Northamptonshire going forward, or the two Northamptonshires going forward, as long as we're sharing that system.
Right.
With Peterborough, it's more adult social care type systems.
Yeah. So we could end up with what I call a double spoke. We're doing with Peterborough, we're also doing with Milton.
It will be a different way to get assurance, but it's the most effective and efficient way to complete a series of audits.
Okay, I just hope it doesn't lead to duplication, that's all. I have no further questions. Anybody else, any questions? The recommendation is the committee is asked to approve the joint working protocol for internal audits. I can't see any objections, so as a committee we approve.
Thank you very much.
There we go. Thank you very much indeed. Neil, that says here you're free unless you want to stay and listen. The final agenda item is back down now to agenda item number 6. I think, if I'm correct, and that is the Safer Recruitment in Schools update. And I've lost the papers here, sorry about that. And unfortunately, we do not have an officer to present this particular paper, but I'm hopeful that you've read through it, and if we do have any questions, then we can raise those questions accordingly through Dawn, and they will appear as an appendix with this report, and obviously we'll get a response from the officer concerned. John.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just had a question about the number of LADO allegation manager meetings. On page 28, it says there were 29 in the last 6 months. I wonder what the figure was for the same time last year. So if we could sort of find that out.
Yep, that's certainly put that forward. Improvement
or worsening.
Mike, we'll find that out, John. Yes, Mike?
Yeah,
thank you, Chairman. I well remember an early report on safer recruitment from schools, and I well remember Councillor Hudson's response and reaction. And I think they're still actually trying to repair the ceiling where he exploded. At the time, I viewed with considerable concern the figures we were getting, saying that they were very pleased, I'm doing this from memory now, that the number of failures...
At least you've got one, Mike.
Sorry?
It's from the chair. At least you've got one.
Yes. But don't rush me, Chairman. That the number of failures that they observed this reporting period, and this was several years ago, was down to only 19%. And I think that got a fairly stark reaction from, as I say, Councillor Hudson. Since then, there have been continuous reports. We've had a very effective working relationship with Chris Medal, and now we're generating that with Diane. And my view is that the system is much much more secure. That's never to say never, because that's just stupid. But I feel much comforted as I leave that area, at least of the council's services, has dramatically improved. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mike. I must admit, when I read this report, I thought, what has happened over the past year, and we're celebrating the anniversary today, that I was so impressed that we've managed to get back into the schools in the timescale, and we've managed to undertake as many investigations and trainings that we have done. And I really do applaud the work our officers have done in this area, considering the magnitude of the task before them and the problems obviously COVID has caused. But I really like to put that in the minutes and on paper. And I hope I have your support in that particular remark there. Do we have any other questions? We've noted John's question. Do we have any other questions for Diane at all? No, fine. Obviously then the recommendation is to note and comment on this report. It now says, according to my little computer here, that is the end of the meeting, but in fact it isn't, because I've got another agenda item which was left off of that particular one, which is the Audit and Accounts Committee Forward Agenda Plan. Dawn, is there anything you'd like to comment on this one, which is updated on the 15th of March 2021? Anything changed to that, please?
Yes, Chairman, and apologies for leaving it off your briefing note. It just ties in with the last item, safer recruitment in schools. Diane was scheduled to come back to committee on the 1st of June, but she can't actually make that date and she doesn't want to miss another one. So she's asked if she could come back to committee at the following meeting instead.
Well, personally, I have no objection to that. Other committee members, I think, for those of you that might not be returning, are we happy with that? See no objections. Yes, that's accepted. Members, have you any other comments on the Audit and Accounts Committee Forward Agenda Plan, please?
Well, I think, Chairman, we said that there were certain matters to be left to be decided on Friday.
Yeah, I was going to.
And that there may then be some further alteration.
Yeah, coming back to that. Thank you very much for that. Yes, certainly on Friday we need to discuss what is happening with regards, especially with Manor Farm, and also the other one being BDO, I think, and where we go there on the financial side. But those two issues, I think, we'll put down for Friday. If you remind me on those aspects, Dawn, for Friday, please. Otherwise, can I thank you all for today, and in particular, can I thank Ian for substituting again, and again, if I may, Matthew, very much appreciated, and I'm sorry to have dragged you away at such short notice, but on behalf of us all, can I say we wish Mac the best of luck from us with regards his viral infection, and I hope he pulls out of it quickly. And hopefully he might be able to join us on Friday, but I doubt it. Otherwise, with anything else, any points, I'd like to close the meeting and thank you all and have the rest of the evening, and I hope it's an enjoyable one. Thank you, Peter, much appreciated. Dawn, could you just stay on to the end, please, for me, if I may?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you very much.